In 2003, the Deep Impact spacecraft intentionally crashed into a comet, kicking up a huge cloud of debris in the process. But did you know that NASA had to make sure the moon wasn't around during this critical experiment? And if that sounds weird, just wait until you hear what would happen if the moon disappeared entirely. To understand why NASA was concerned about the moon, let's first get some facts straight. The moon doesn't rotate on its axis. That means it always shows us the same side, with Earth being its only neighbor. In fact, the moon and Earth are so close astronomically speaking, it is our closest natural satellite. The moon is 384,400 miles or 616,000 kilometers from Earth. To put that in perspective, that's just a small fraction of the distance between Earth and the Sun, which is about 94 million miles or 150 million kilometers. As you might have already guessed, the moon's gravity has an effect on Earth. For example, it causes tides. The gravitational attraction between two objects depends on their masses and how far apart they are. Since the moon is so much less massive than Earth, we're only talking about 1/8 the mass of Earth. Its gravitational pull isn't as strong, but because it's so close, it's still significant enough to influence our planet. Earth's gravity keeps us grounded and gives us our weight. But without the moon's gravity, things would be a little different. Well, a lot different. Without the moon, the Earth-Moon system wouldn't exist. Our planet would spin through space like a lonely tumbleweed in a cosmic desert. Okay, don't worry, it's not actually drifting off course. Earth is orbiting the Sun just fine without any help from the moon. But our satellite does play a part in stabilizing Earth's orbit. Because the moon is so close to Earth, it helps keep our planet's orbit nice and stable. If it disappeared, Earth's orbit could become unstable and take an erratic path around the Sun, though it likely wouldn't go flying into deep space or hurtle towards the Sun. Instead, it would probably settle into a new orbit, albeit a slightly wonky one. However, we wouldn't be able to predict where exactly it would end up. So, while life on Earth would continue as usual for a while, we couldn't be sure if or when something unexpected might happen. But an unstable orbit isn't the only way the moon affects Earth. The moon's gravity also stabilizes our planet's rotation. You see, Earth isn't perfectly round. It's actually a bit wider at the equator due to the centrifugal force created by our planet's rotation. The moon's gravity pulls more on the side of Earth facing it, and that tug slows down Earth's rotation ever so slightly. As a result, our planet is about 17 miles or 27 kilometers narrower at the poles and 34 miles or 55 kilometers wider at the equator. Without the moon, Earth would be free to rotate faster. This means a day would be shorter. How much shorter? Depends on what scientists think Earth would weigh without the moon's gravitational pull dragging it down. Some experts say a day without the moon could be less than 20 hours long. Others say it could be closer to 18 hours long. Either way, we can say with certainty that a day without the moon would be shorter than the 24 hours we're used to. And all those changes are just the beginning. There are a few other things that would happen if the moon disappeared, most of them tied to the mysterious ways our brains and bodies work. You see, every culture throughout history has looked to the moon to tell time, including the ancient Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks. We use the phases of the moon to divide time into months, and every month is named after a deity associated with the moon. Even though we now have digital watches and smartphones to tell time, the moon's phases are still useful. The moon is about 7 times brighter than the rest of the stars in the night sky combined, making it easy to spot. So people have always used the moon to navigate, especially since it lines up with certain constellations throughout the year. The predictability of the lunar cycle has influenced human behavior for thousands of years. Farmers plant crops and harvest them based on the phases of the moon. Animal mating patterns follow the lunar cycle too. Even human babies born under a full moon seem more active and more likely to cry than babies born at other times. All these behaviors are just a few examples of how the moon influences life on Earth. But for the most part, humans have been safe from its wrath. A full moon may inspire some uninformed fears, but for the most part, we haven't had to worry about dying because of the moon. Well, unless you were an astronaut on the moon during the Apollo missions, you were probably safe. But what if the moon didn't vanish but instead crashed into Earth? You might be surprised to learn that there are no real consequences to a moon crash. Scientists have calculated that it would take a lot of energy to push the moon out of its orbit. Let's say a rocket launched from Earth managed to reach the moon and pushed it out of orbit. In that case, the moon would eventually fall back to Earth because nothing else is strong enough to hold it in place. At that point, the moon would spiral toward Earth, taking about a year to complete one loop around the planet. During this time, the moon would gradually speed up and heat up as it descended lower and lower. When it finally hit Earth, the moon wouldn't be whole anymore. It would either break apart or turn to vapor as it entered the atmosphere. So, if the moon fell to Earth, we would have no warning. At best, we might notice it speeding up as it made its final descent. At worst, we wouldn't realize anything was wrong until it was too late. Okay, so we'd probably die if the moon fell to Earth, but what if it exploded? Would we survive if the moon blew up in the sky? Maybe, but not without some major repercussions. A moon explosion could happen in a few different ways. It could blow up on its own, or something could hit it, such as a rogue planet or comet. If the moon exploded suddenly, we'd likely see it coming. It would start to break apart, kind of like a firework, before crashing to Earth in pieces. A large explosion in space would not be visible from Earth because there's no air to carry sound waves. But astronomers would be able to see the pieces of the exploding moon and calculate its trajectory. They could then determine which fragments were headed toward Earth and notify everyone to take shelter. In this scenario, we would survive, although some of the larger chunks of rock hurtling toward Earth could cause some damage. So it would definitely be a bad day. Now, what if the moon exploded without warning? Say a comet struck the moon and caused it to blow up without giving us time to prepare. The remnants of the moon would rain down on Earth, breaking through the ozone layer and causing a massive extinction event. Of course, a comet hitting the moon is pretty unlikely, but if it happened, we should probably say goodbye to most of the species on Earth. But even if the moon fell apart in a less destructive way, say it slowly lost pieces over billions of years, we'd still be in trouble. That's because rocks falling from the sky are responsible for many of the extinction events in Earth's history. These rocks are known as meteorites, and they come in different shapes, sizes, and compositions. Scientists categorize them based on their composition. For example, stony meteorites contain silicate minerals and are the most common type. Iron meteorites are mostly made of iron and nickel, and stony iron meteorites are a mix of both. Regardless of their makeup, meteorites can do a lot of damage. Meteorites are hot when they enter Earth's atmosphere. They move fast, too. In 2013, a 20-meter-wide meteorite streaked across the sky above Russia. It moved at about 11 miles per second and weighed an estimated 13,000 tons. When it hit the atmosphere, it exploded with the force of 30 atomic bombs. About 1,500 people were injured from the blast, and hundreds of buildings were damaged. But a meteorite that big is pretty rare. Most meteorites are much smaller, but they still pack a punch. A meteorite just 3 meters wide moving at a speed of 41 miles per second could kill a person. So imagine what would happen if meteorites rained down on Earth every day. Eventually, Earth would look like a sponge that's been used just a little too many times. It's hard to say exactly what would happen if the moon broke apart and bombarded Earth, but we do know it wouldn't be good. In 2009, a 2-meter-wide meteorite entered the atmosphere and exploded. It was so bright that people thought a plane had crashed. Then the airburst released a bunch of debris that rained down over Africa. Scientists found some of the fragments and analyzed their composition. They discovered that they were about 4.5 billion years old, meaning the meteorite was a piece of the very early solar system. Since it was so old, scientists realized that meteorites like this could potentially tell us more about the formation of Earth and the solar system. So, rather than being worried about a meteorite hitting us, we can take a page out of NASA's book and use them as a learning opportunity. Just don't tell NASA we told you that. They like pretending they're trying to defend us against killer asteroids. Now watch, asteroid threat real or not, or check out why is NASA crashing a spacecraft into an asteroid.